Hello, this week's video is around energy intensity ratios, which are causing quite a stir within the ESOS world. Mainly because if you're an ESOS participant, you're having to look backwards from where you've came, and having that data to be able to do that is proving quite difficult. Now, this is something that you are going to have to look forward and put something more robust in place. But how do you do that for a period of time that is passed with data that's not available? Well, I'll explain a few things here. First off, what are these intensity ratios? You've got the kilowatt hour per passenger mile traveled or kilowatt hour per ton mile traveled. It's one or two. No other ones are available. So you need to translate your operation back into one of these two metrics, which will most likely not neatly fit into one of these two buckets. However, we are where we are. So this is what we need to do in order to be compliant. So on the first one I want to talk about is kilowatt hour per passenger mile traveled. Okay, so this is obviously all related to passengers. So your buses, your coaches, motorbikes, cars. But also you can see on there, I've put a picture of a van on because there's some vans out there like service vans, which technicians and engineers use, which fit better into this category than they do the freight one. And so you're going to need some data for this, of course, and the data you're going to need is kilowatt hours consumed. You're going to need to know your miles covered and the amount of passengers you've moved. And once you've got that data, you make a calculation. So 20,000 kilowatt hours consumed in this example, 20,000 miles covered in this example, and you've moved two passengers per mile. So that gives you 40,000 passenger miles. 20,000 times 2 is 40,000. You then divide the kilowatt hour consumed by that, and it gives you 0.5 kilowatt hour per passenger mile. Absolutely easy. Well, the calculation is, but the data behind it and how you get it is the difficult part. And this is what we're finding. These are the conversations I'm having with clients all the time now, is about how do we come up with a workable solution that makes sense. Now, what a lot of the things we're doing is having to make assumptions. And I'll give you company cars, a great example of this. I don't think I've ever come across a company, or never will come across a company, that know how many drivers they've had in a company, or passengers rather, they've had in a company car at any given point. But obviously, it's fair to say it's probably one. So that is the assumption that you'd use in that scenario. But like I said, you need to look going forward. It needs to be a lot more succinct. So you might have to put the metrics and measures in place now in order for the next phase to be a lot more scientific. Now, the other one is kilowatt hours per ton mile traveled. So this is the stuff that goes on the back of vehicles. Obviously, this is the weight and freight. So data you need that kilowatt hours consumed, which you can just get from the auditor, and they can work that out. That's no problem. And then you've got the miles covered. Now, for the passenger stuff, sometimes that's quite difficult to get, and you have to put a lot of assumptions around MPGs and so forth. But actually, with anything that comes under O license regulations, of course, you're going to have that information. So you just have to have the right mileage for the period that it's covering. That's the reference period. You may have some smaller vans where you don't have that sort of mileage. So you're talking your 3.5 tons and below, and so you might have to apply what you do with passengers, so MPGs and things like that. And the final amount of information that you'll need is the tons moved. Now, to give a worked example, again, I'll do another very basic one. 8,000 kilowatt hours consumed, 4,000 miles covered. That gives you 16,000 ton miles if you have got 4 tons per mile on the back of the vehicle. And that gives you a 0.5 kilowatt hour per ton mile calculation. Now, how you get to that tons is the difficult part when it comes to freight. Lots of companies simply don't record this information, so you're going to have to make assumptions. So some of the things that I've been working with clients to be able to do is look at their throughput of product, and then made some assumptions around that of how much actually went out over a given time, on how many journeys as well. And This about being clear with your assumptions and coming up with something that makes sense and holds water and has that credibility. Now, going forwards, you're going to have to come up with something more scientific. But again, you are where you are, so you've got to look backwards and see what you can put together. Other things that you can possibly do is you can take make an assumption of how laden the vehicles are. You can always say, well, my vehicle's always going to be about 50% laden, for example, and then you basically you could look at the payload of the vehicle and say, well, okay, so you got total plated weight, take off the weight of the vehicle, then you've got your payload, and then you apply that laden percentage to it. You could do that. Again, this is in lieu of anything else, so it's just whatever makes sense to you. So a quick reminder before I close off this video is that the audit deadline for ESOS is the 5th of June of this year. So that's when all of this needs to be done by, and this is when your intensity ratios need to be done, need to be inputted into the portal and wrapped up. And then the action plan deadline, don't forget there's a whole new legislation around action plan that is got to be done by the 5th of December 2024. And I imagine that intensity ratios will form part of that plan, and they expect to see progress on that going forward, which has to be updated and reported on every year, don't forget. So finally, hopefully you found that useful. It's been a real head scratcher to get your head around intensity ratios, but I'm here to help if you need me. It's info@focusnetzero.co.uk or visit our website at www.focusnetzero.co.uk. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if I can help or you have any questions. Thanks very much.